Yeah, even to Wally World. Let me tell you about the station wagon. It's dead. Sounds brutal, but seriously, when's the last time you spotted a brand new American station wagon on a dealer lot? I'm betting never, or it was back in the 90s when the Chevrolet Caprice and Buick Roadmaster, the last American full-size wagons, bit the dust in 1996. My audience always keeps me honest on this stuff, and I love that about you all. And lately, tons of you have been asking me to make a video about the station wagon. And you know what? You're absolutely right. This story needs to be told. We're talking about a vehicle that hauled suburban families not just to ball fields, carpools, and school plays, but everywhere in between. The station wagon is easily one of the most successful vehicle types in American history. Don't believe me? Check this out. In 1976, U.S. sales hit 972,212 units and made up 10% of all vehicles sold in the U.S. Americans had 62 station wagon models to choose from. Pretty wild, right? Today, there are barely that many SUV models available. And we all know how insanely popular SUVs are. Think back to the last family road trip you took in a station wagon. I'm betting for most of you it involved wood paneling and AM/FM radio, and fighting with your siblings over who got to sit in the way back. You know, that rear-facing third row where you could make faces at all the cars behind you. If you're like me, you had no idea they were doomed back then. Station wagons felt as permanent as baseball and apple pie. So what happened? How did we go from 62 models to 0 American-made wagons in just 20 years? Well, that's exactly what we're digging into today. The origin story. The station wagon story kicks off in a totally different America. We're talking early 1900s when most people still traveled by train. And that's actually where the name comes from. These vehicles were literally wagons that serviced train stations. Back then, a station wagon was called a depot hack because it worked around train depots as hacks, taxi cabs. Now let me paint you a picture of what these early vehicles looked like and how they actually functioned. Imagine stepping off a train in 1910 with a mountain of luggage piled high. There's no Uber, no taxi cabs like we have today. What you needed was something that could haul both you and all your belongings, from the train station to wherever you were headed. That's where the depot hack came in. Basically a modified truck with benches for passengers and plenty of space for luggage. The first real big breakthrough came from Henry Ford. In 1910, for $700, Ford started selling bare Model T chassis to independent manufacturers, who would then slap wooden wagon bodies on them. This wasn't Ford building station wagons themselves. They just provided the mechanical bits. Small companies all over the country were making these custom wooden bodies. Get this, in 1909, there were 551 American car manufacturers. Can you even imagine? Today we've got, 3 major ones? But here's where it gets interesting. The switch from depot hack to station wagon happened sometime between 1923 and 1929. Nobody knows exactly when, but by 1929, when the first station wagon from the American Big Three came out as a Ford Model A, the name had stuck. The Steel Revolution. The real game changer came in 1935. That's when Chevrolet tried something nobody had done before. They built an all-steel station wagon. No more wood. Well, mostly no more wood. Thing is, it didn't catch on right away. People actually dug the wood. It made the wagons look expensive, prestigious, classy even. In the 1930s and early 1940s, woody station wagons cost way more than standard cars. They were total status symbols. Ford wasn't about to let Chevy have all the fun. In 1936, they opened their own wagon plant in Iron Mountain, Michigan. And this wasn't just any old factory. That plant in the state's Upper Peninsula used raw material from Ford's massive timber operations near Lake Superior. Ford literally owned their own forests. They were shipping complete wooden wagon bodies to assembly plants all over North America. But here's the problem with woody wagons. They were a massive pain in the ass to maintain and keep looking good. The wood needed constant babying and attention. You had to varnish it regularly, check for rot, make sure the joint stayed tight. The cars needed attention constantly, almost like a second job. Imagine having to refinish your car like it was a piece of furniture every single year. No thanks. The real turning point came after World War II. In 1946, Willys, the Jeep company, dropped something game-changing. The 1946 Willys Jeep station wagon was the first family-sized, all-steel production wagon. Despite the fake woody look sides, this was absolutely huge. They kept the wood grain look painted on the sides because people still thought wood meant quality, but structurally, underneath it was all steel. By 1949, the writing was on the wall for real woodies. Plymouth rolled out the Suburban, an all-steel wagon that looked fantastic and didn't need you to moonlight as an amateur woodworker. After the Plymouth Suburban hit in 1949, wooden wagons were discontinued altogether and totally done. Sure, some companies kept using wood trim through the mid-1950s, but after that it was all fake, just vinyl graphics pretending to be wood. Which, when you think about it, is such a perfect metaphor for how America was changing. The Golden Age. Now we get to the really good stuff. The Golden Age of the station wagon. Want to understand why station wagons became such a huge deal? You gotta look at what was happening in America after World War II. We're talking about the birth of the suburbs spreading across the country, the interstate highway system connecting everything, and obviously the baby boom, creating massive families. Suddenly, millions of Americans needed a car that could handle a bigger family, longer trips, and all the stuff and crap that came with the new American lifestyle. The 1950s were when things really exploded and took off. Station wagons went from less than 3% of US production car volume in 1950 to almost 17% of the market by the end of the decade. Think about that for a second. In just 10 years, wagons went from total niche product to nearly 1 in 5 cars sold. And in 1958, something really crazy and remarkable happened. The top-selling body style in the Plymouth line was the station wagon. Not the sedan, not the coupe, the wagon. What made them so incredibly special during this whole era? Well, for starters, they were absolutely massive and enormous. We're talking serious land yachts here. These weren't just regular cars, they were living rooms on wheels, rolling palaces for the American family. Take the 1968 Ford Country Squire, for example. This beast was over 218 inches long. That's more than 18 feet of pure American steel. For comparison, a modern Chevy Tahoe is only about 210 inches long. Yeah, your big SUV is actually smaller than Grandpa's wagon. Let that sink in for a minute. But it wasn't just about the sheer size. These wagons meant something bigger, something more profound. They were a legit symbol of the American dream in action. Americans wanted it all, or at least way more than what they'd experienced during the rough 30s and the war years. And the station wagon was gonna deliver it all. The first true multi-purpose vehicle that could handle their expanded horizons. A large family, a suburban house, hobbies, recreation, and even prestige. It was all packaged into one vehicle. The variety was absolutely mind-blowing and unprecedented in automotive history. Remember when I said there were 62 wagon models in 1976? Well, let me break down what that actually meant for consumers. You had 2-door wagons, 4-door wagons, wagons with pillars, wagons without pillars called hardtops, wagons with 2 rows of seats, wagons with 3 rows of seats. Some had rear-facing third rows, some had side-facing jump seats for maximum capacity. The tailgates alone were an engineering marvel and a point of pride for manufacturers. Some swung out like doors for easy access. Some dropped down like pickup trucks for loading heavy cargo. And GM even invented something called the clamshell design, where the tailgate completely disappeared out of the way when opened, creating a massive opening. The 1960s brought even more innovation. This was the era of the Vista Cruiser with its raised roof and skylights. Yeah, panoramic roofs aren't some new idea. Buick and Oldsmobile were putting glass panels in wagon roofs back in the 60s. You had compact wagons like the Ford Falcon, mid-size wagons, and of course the full-size behemoths that could seat 9 people comfortably. Well, comfortably if you don't mind touching shoulders with your siblings. Let me tell you about the cultural impact these things had. In the 1960s and early 70s, if you were a middle-class American family, you probably had a station wagon. It was just what you did. These weren't just transportation, they were mobile headquarters for the American family. Soccer practice, grocery runs, camping trips, driving to grandma's house 3 states away. The wagon did it all. And the marketing, oh man, the marketing was something else entirely. Ford called their top trim wagons Country Squire to make you feel like some sort of landed gentry. Chrysler had the town and country. See, it could handle both your urban commute and your weekend escapes to the countryside or beach. Every manufacturer had their own wood grain trim packages with unique patterns. Even though by the 1960s it was all just vinyl, people loved it. That fake wood said, "I've made it," louder than any chrome badge ever could. The performance wasn't too shabby either. These wagons weren't just about hauling groceries. By the late 1960s, you could get a station wagon with a big block V8 that would absolutely haul. We're talking 400-plus cubic inch engines in some cases. Sure, they got about 8 miles per gallon, but gas was cheap and America was on top of the world. What could possibly go wrong? The business side. All right, now I need to talk about the numbers. And I know some of you are thinking, oh no, not financial talk. But stick with me here because this is where the story gets really interesting. See, on the surface, the station wagon business looked fantastic through the early 1970s. Sales were strong, profits were good, and Detroit was cranking out wagons as fast as they could build them. But there were warning signs if you knew where to look. Let me explain this like I'm on Shark Tank. When you're running a business, you want to keep your costs low and your prices high. Pretty simple, right? Well, the problem with station wagons was that they were expensive to build. You had all the mechanical bits of a regular car, plus you needed a longer frame, bigger roof, more glass, more seats, heavier-duty suspension to handle all that cargo. You couldn't charge that much more for them, though. In 1970, when wagon sales peaked at 972,212, sold, representing 10% of total automobile sales, the big three were making decent money on each unit, but not spectacular money. The profit margins were actually better on the sedans because they were simpler to build. But as long as volume stayed high, everything was fine. Then October 1973 happened. The oil crisis hits. In October 1973, the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries, OAPEC, announced that it was implementing a total oil embargo against nations supporting Israel. If you weren't alive then, it's hard to explain just how absolutely insane things got. The price of oil had risen by nearly 300%, from $3 per barrel to nearly $12 per barrel globally. That's a massive jump that sent shockwaves through the entire economy. But the oil shock of the 70s wasn't just about price. It was about availability and the fear of running out. Gas stations ran completely dry. People waited in lines for literally hours just to fill up their tanks. There were even odd rationing systems based on your license plate number. The psychological impact was absolutely massive and long-lasting. And suddenly, that massive station wagon that got 10 miles per gallon seemed like a really, really bad idea. Americans completely panicked. They started trading in their big cars for smaller, more fuel-efficient imports from Japan and Europe. Japanese manufacturers couldn't build cars fast enough to meet the sudden and explosive demand. The wagon market didn't collapse immediately, but the damage was done. People started thinking differently about what kind of car they needed. Did they really need a 19-foot-long vehicle that drank gas like water? Maybe not. The second oil crisis hit in 1979, and this time it was even worse. Gas prices doubled again, lines got longer, and now station wagons weren't just expensive to run, they were seen as wasteful, irresponsible even. Detroit tried to respond. They started making smaller wagons, more fuel-efficient wagons. But here's the thing. When you make a wagon smaller, you lose the main reason people bought it in the first place, space. A small wagon is just a weird-looking sedan. The minivan arrives. Then, in 1983, everything changed forever. Chrysler introduced the Dodge Caravan and Plymouth Voyager, the first modern minivans designed from the ground up. And honestly, it was absolutely brilliant marketing and engineering. Lee Iacocca and his team at Chrysler had basically reinvented the station wagon for the modern era, but made it cool again. Think about it carefully. The minivan gave you all the cargo space of a wagon, better fuel economy thanks to improved aerodynamics and lighter weight construction, easier entry and exit with those sliding doors that kids couldn't accidentally open into traffic. And here's the absolute kicker. It didn't have the stigma. Wagons had become totally associated with boring suburban life. But minivans? They were completely new, they were innovative, they were the future of family transportation. Chrysler sold an incredible 210,000 minivans in the first year alone. Within just 5 years, they were selling over 500,000 annually. Every other manufacturer scrambled desperately to create their own versions. The Ford Aerostar, Chevy Astro, Toyota Previa. Everyone wanted a piece of this lucrative market. And with every single minivan sold, that was one less station wagon on the road. By the mid-1980s, wagon sales were in absolute freefall. Manufacturers started quietly discontinuing their wagon models one by one. First the compact wagons went, then the mid-size ones. By the early 1990s, only the full-size wagons remained, and even those were living on borrowed time. The SUV takeover. But wait, it gets even worse for wagons. Just when they thought minivans were their only real competition, along came the massive SUV revolution. And this one was even more absolutely devastating for the wagon. SUVs had been around for quite a while. The Jeep Wagoneer, the Chevy Suburban, the Ford Bronco. But they were strictly niche vehicles used mostly for actual serious off-roading or heavy-duty towing. Then something fundamental changed in the late 80s and early 90s. Manufacturers discovered a massive loophole in CAFE fuel economy standards that would change everything. See, CAFE, Corporate Average Fuel Economy, standards required car manufacturers to meet certain specific fuel economy averages across their entire fleet. But SUVs were classified as light trucks, and light trucks had much more lenient standards. So manufacturers could build them bigger and thirstier without any penalty whatsoever. And boy, did they ever take advantage of that. The Ford Explorer launched in 1991 and became a massive instant hit. The Jeep Grand Cherokee followed right behind. Then came the Chevy Tahoe, the GMC Yukon, the Dodge Durango, and countless others. By the mid-1990s, SUVs were absolutely everywhere you looked. What made SUVs so incredibly appealing to American buyers? Well, they gave you that high-commanding seating position that made you feel safe and in total control. They had that rugged masculine image that said you were adventurous, capable, ready for absolutely anything. And unlike minivans, which screamed soccer mom to everyone, SUVs had this undeniable cool factor. They were totally acceptable and even desirable for dads to drive. The fact that most SUV owners never actually went off-road, never towed anything heavier than a bike rack, and spent 99% of their time on perfectly paved roads in the suburbs, that didn't matter one bit. It was all about the image, the feeling, the perception. And station wagons absolutely couldn't compete with that emotional appeal. The death blow. So now you had station wagons getting squeezed from both sides. Families who wanted practicality and space were buying minivans. Families who wanted image and status were buying SUVs. What was left for the wagon? Not much, as it turned out. By the mid-1990s, wagon sales had dropped to barely 2% of the market. Manufacturers were losing money on every wagon they built because the volume was so low. The tooling costs, the production costs, none of it made sense anymore. In 1996, GM made the call. They discontinued the Chevrolet Caprice and Buick Roadmaster station wagons. These were the last full-size American station wagons. And just like that, an entire segment was gone. Ford had already killed off the Country Squire in 1991. Chrysler got out of the wagon business even earlier. Some import brands kept making wagons: Volvo, Mercedes, Subaru. But these were either luxury vehicles or niche products. The era of the American family station wagon was over. Why image matters. But let me tell you what I think really killed the station wagon. Image and perception. Somewhere along the way, wagons became linked with boring suburban life. They became the car equivalent of beige. They meant compromise, practicality over passion, function over form. They were what your parents drove, and that's the kiss of death for any product. Meanwhile, SUVs and minivans were new and exciting. They represented the future. And Americans, we love the future. We don't like being reminded of the past, especially when that past involves wood paneling and vinyl seats. There's also this generational thing. The people who grew up in the back of station wagons, the kids of the 70s and 80s, they remembered being embarrassed when their parents picked them up from school. They remembered being the wagon family while their cooler friends had sports cars or trucks. When those kids grew up and started buying their own cars, they wanted anything but a wagon. They associated wagons with their parents, with being uncool, with everything they were trying to escape. So they bought SUVs that looked tough and rugged, or sports sedans that looked fast and sporty. Anything but a wagon. The automotive press didn't help either. Magazine reviewers constantly mocked station wagons. Soccer mom mobiles, they called them. Suburban torture chambers. The jokes wrote themselves. And manufacturers noticed. Why invest in a product category that everyone mocks? The crossover era. Now, here's where it gets really ironic. Fast forward to the 2000s, and what happens? Manufacturers invent the crossover. And what is a crossover, really? It's a station wagon. Seriously. Take a sedan platform, give it a longer roof, add a hatchback, raise it up a few inches, slap some plastic cladding on it, and boom! You've got a crossover. The Honda CR-V, that's a wagon. The Toyota RAV4, wagon. The Subaru Outback, that's literally just a raised station wagon, and Subaru doesn't even try to hide it. But people love them because they're called crossovers, not wagons. Same basic shape, same basic utility, but a different name makes all the difference. It's the ultimate proof that marketing and perception matter more than actual functionality. We didn't stop wanting the space and versatility of a wagon. We just stopped wanting to call it a wagon. Some manufacturers figured this out. Volvo, bless them, kept making wagons through the whole dark period. They just called them cross-country models or sport wagons and gave them slightly more ground clearance. Audi did the same with their all-road models. And you know what? They sell just fine, as long as you don't use the W word. The numbers don't lie. Let's talk about what actually happened to the market. In 1976, station wagons made up 10% of all vehicle sales in America. That's nearly 1 million vehicles. By 1986, that number had dropped to 5%. By 1996, it was under 2%. Today, it's effectively zero for American manufacturers. But here's the thing. If you count crossovers as wagons, which functionally they are, then wagons are bigger than ever. Crossovers now make up over 40% of the US vehicle market. We didn't stop buying wagons, we just rebranded them. The same vehicle that people refused to buy in 1995 because it was a dorky wagon is flying off the lots today as a versatile crossover. It's the same length, same interior space, same basic profile. But it's 3 inches taller and has plastic on the wheel arches, so now it's cool. If that doesn't prove that automotive success is all about marketing and perception, I don't know what does. What we lost. Here's what we really lost when wagons died. Practicality. Yeah, sure, your crossover is practical, but can you actually fit a 4x8 sheet of plywood in it? Can you crash and sleep in the back on a camping trip? Can you haul and carry 9 people and all their luggage? A proper real wagon could do all that stuff and still cost way less than a modern crossover. We also totally lost character. Every single wagon was different and unique. You had sport wagons desperately trying to be cool, luxury wagons loaded with leather and chrome, basic wagons that were just totally honest transportation. Now, every single crossover looks absolutely identical. Like someone just inflated a sedan and slapped on plastic cladding. Where's the personality and character in that? We lost honesty too. A wagon said, "I'm here to haul stuff and people." It didn't pretend to be anything else. But SUVs and crossovers sell this fantasy of adventure and capability that 99% of owners will never use. You're not going off-road. You're not fording rivers. You're driving to Costco. Let's be honest about it. And we lost affordability. Station wagons were typically priced similar to or slightly above sedans, but SUVs and crossovers command premium prices. You're paying extra for that high seating position and those plastic fender flares. A 1990 Ford Taurus wagon cost about the same as a Taurus sedan. But today's Ford Edge crossover costs $5,000 to $10,000, more than a comparable Fusion sedan would have. Could they come back? So the question everyone asks is, could wagons ever make a comeback? Will we see a return of the traditional American station wagon? Honestly, I think that ship has sailed. The infrastructure of American life has been totally built around SUVs and crossovers now. Parking spaces are specifically designed for them. Drive-throughs are built way higher for them. And most importantly, American self-image is completely wrapped up and tied up in them. We've totally convinced ourselves that we absolutely need to sit up high, that we desperately need these command seating positions, that we might suddenly and randomly need to ford a river on the way to soccer practice. Never mind that this never happens. Never mind that lower and longer is better for cargo space, fuel economy, and handling. We want to sit up high, and that's that. The only way I really see wagons coming back is if gas hits $10 a gallon and stays there permanently, or if there's some absolutely massive cultural shift where efficiency becomes cool and trendy again. But even then, we'd probably just make smaller and more compact SUVs rather than admit wagons actually make way more sense. We're just stubborn like that. Maybe electric vehicles will change things. When range anxiety is a concern, efficiency matters. A low, sleek wagon is more aerodynamic than a tall, boxy SUV. That means more range from the same battery. Maybe we'll see electric wagons make a comeback, but they probably won't call them wagons. They'll be electric sportbacks, or sustainable mobility platforms, or some other marketing nonsense. Personal reflection. You know, putting this whole video together really made me realize something important. I never actually got to experience the true golden age of station wagons in their full glory. By the time I was born, they were already totally dying off and on their way out of production. But I definitely remember seeing the last few survivors and stragglers hanging on. Maybe a beat-up old Taurus wagon sitting in a grocery store parking lot gathering dust. Or someone's old faithful Volvo 240 that just absolutely wouldn't quit and refused to die no matter what. And every single time I saw one, it honestly felt like spotting an endangered species in the wild. What really made wagons special wasn't the fuel economy, absolutely terrible and horrible. It wasn't the handling, like literally piloting and driving a couch. And it definitely wasn't the looks. Let's be totally real and honest, most were pretty damn ugly. It was what they stood for and represented. They were the ultimate family car back when family actually meant something really specific. Mom, dad, exactly 2.5 kids, and a dog named Spot. Where life happened. The wagon was where real life actually happened, where memories were made, where kids constantly fought with their siblings on the long way to grandma's house, where families learned geography by playing license plate bingo on cross-country road trips through different states, where kids got their very first taste of freedom sitting in the way back, facing completely backwards, making silly faces at all the cars behind them. No seatbelts, no airbags in that back row, just you and 1/8 of an inch of safety glass between you and the highway rushing by behind you. It's amazing any of us survived, honestly. These cars were rolling love letters and testimonials to American optimism and hope. Who else would actually build a vehicle getting maybe 10 miles per gallon right during an oil crisis? Who else would make the third row of seats face backwards just for kicks and the fun of it? Who else would slap fake wood paneling on the outside of a car and honestly think, yeah, that looks good and classy? Only us, that's who. Part of me is honestly shocked and amazed they still exist at all in any form. But here's what we really lost when wagons completely died. The real loss. Practicality. Yeah, I know your crossover is practical, but can you fit a 4x8 sheet of plywood in it without folding the seats? Can you sleep in the back on a camping trip? Can you carry 9 people and their luggage for a family vacation? A proper wagon could do all that and still cost less than a modern crossover. We also lost character. Every wagon was different and had its own personality. You had the sport wagons trying to be cool with their performance upgrades, the luxury wagons with their leather and chrome, the basic wagons that were just honest transportation. Now every crossover looks the same, like someone inflated a sedan and added plastic cladding. Where's the personality in that? The death of the station wagon teaches us something important about American consumer culture. We don't always buy what makes sense. We buy what makes us feel good about ourselves. SUVs and crossovers make people feel safe, capable, and adventurous. Even if they never leave the suburbs, wagons made people feel practical. And who wants to feel practical? It also shows how quickly things can change. In one generation, wagons went from 17% of the market to basically zero. The same thing could happen to SUVs if the right combination of factors comes along. Maybe it'll be electric vehicles, maybe it'll be autonomous cars. Maybe it'll be something we haven't thought of yet, but the one constant is change. Unintended consequences. There's also a lesson about unintended consequences that regulators never saw coming. CAFE standards were supposed to make cars more efficient, but they just pushed people into trucks and SUVs with worse mileage. Safety regulations made cars heavier, which made them less efficient. Every solution created new problems that needed solving. It's like we were playing automotive whack-a-mole with no end in sight. But maybe the biggest lesson is about loss. We lost something when wagons disappeared. A genuine connection to a simpler time. A way more optimistic America. A whole world where a family car was just exactly that. A car for the family. Not a statement, not a lifestyle choice or brand, just completely honest transportation that simply did what you needed it to do. Your memories. So I really gotta ask, do you actually remember riding in a station wagon when you were younger? What specific model was it? I'm genuinely really curious what wagon memories you guys have out there and what made them special. Did your family have the classic, iconic Country Squire with all the wood paneling? Maybe a trusty Volvo wagon for you super safety-conscious folks who valued reliability? Or were you one of those really lucky kids who actually got to ride in a Vista Cruiser with the amazing skylights? What do you honestly think really killed the wagon? Do you actually buy my theory that it was a total combo and combination of the oil crisis, minivans, and SUVs all together working against them? Or do you think there's way more to the whole story? Maybe wagons were always doomed from the start, and it just took us a while to realize it. And here's a question I really want you to think about. Do you genuinely miss having real actual station wagons as an option today? Or do you honestly think crossovers and SUVs are just way better overall? Because I'll be honest, I'm torn. My brain knows that modern vehicles are safer, more efficient, and more capable. But my heart misses those long, low wagons with their ridiculous fake wood and backwards-facing seats. For wagon owners, for those of you who actually owned a wagon themselves, not just rode in one as a kid, but bought one with your own hard-earned money and made the choice yourself. What was that whole experience actually like? Were you constantly fighting the stereotype of being a boring suburbanite, driving the ultimate family hauler? Or did you totally embrace the practicality and usefulness it offered? And why did you eventually get rid of it? Be honest. Was it because you needed something different? Or because you wanted something cooler? I'm also really curious about this. Would you actually buy a wagon today if they made them available for purchase? And I mean a real proper wagon, not some lifted Outback or a luxury Mercedes E-Class that costs more than a house down payment. Something like a modern, updated Country Squire with 3 full rows of seats, a big, powerful V8, or maybe a hybrid setup for today's modern world and era with better efficiency. And yeah, even fake wood paneling. Would that honestly interest you at all? Or have we just moved too far past that entire era and left it behind? Enthusiast Corner. Also, for you serious car nerds and enthusiasts out there, what's your absolute favorite wagon of all time? Could be American, European, Japanese, literally whatever you can think of. What wagon do you honestly think represents the absolute best of what the body style could really be and accomplish? I'd love to hear what you have to say about that. The future. And finally, what do you really think the future holds here for the station wagon? Will wagons ever actually make a real comeback in America? Or are we totally doomed to drive progressively taller and taller vehicles until we're literally all riding around in monster trucks on the highway, sitting 10 feet off the ground? Is there honestly any hope at all for those of us who genuinely think lower is better and wagons are totally awesome and wonderful for what they represented? Drop all your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to hear what you have to say about this whole wagon situation and your personal experiences with these amazing vehicles. Thanks so much for watching.